Right now, somewhere in your house, your phone is lighting up. You glance at it. Nothing important. You set it back down. But 30 seconds later, you pick it up again. You're not bored. You're not waiting for news. You're checking, almost on instinct, whether anyone is thinking about you. And here's the strange part. That tiny flicker of unease you just felt has nothing to do with phones at all. It is 200,000 years old. It is older than language, older than fire, older than the idea of a home. What you just felt was your ancestors' oldest alarm system, going off in a body that no longer knows what to do with it. For most of human history, being alone didn't just feel uncomfortable. It was a death sentence. A human being separated from the group rarely survived the season. No spear throwers watching your back. No one to warn you about the lion in the grass. No one to share the kill when your own hunt failed. So evolution did something ruthless and brilliant. It built pain directly into disconnection. Not metaphorical pain. Real, physical, measurable pain. In the early 2000s, a psychologist named John Cacioppo at the University of Chicago set out to understand exactly what loneliness does inside the human body. He wasn't interested in feelings as poetry. He wanted data. So he and his team scanned the brains of people who described themselves as chronically lonely, and they noticed something unsettling. When lonely participants saw images of other people in distress, their brains lit up differently than the brains of people who felt connected. The threat detection centers fired faster. The world, to a lonely brain, looks more dangerous. Not because it actually is, because evolution taught your nervous system that being alone is the danger. Think about that for a second. Your body isn't waiting for a tiger to decide you're unsafe. The absence of people is the warning sign. You don't need a threat in front of you. You simply need an empty room. This is where the story gets stranger, because it's not just your mood that loneliness reaches into. It's your biology, all the way down to the level of cells. In 2010, a researcher named Julianne Holt-Lundstad did something almost nobody had done before. She pulled together data from over 300,000 people across dozens of long-term studies and asked a brutal question. How much does loneliness actually shorten a human life? The answer stunned the scientific community. Chronic loneliness was linked to a higher risk of early death than obesity. It was comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Read that again. Disconnection, just the felt absence of belonging, carries a mortality risk on par with a pack of cigarettes a day, every single day, for years. Why would a feeling carry that much physical weight? Because to your nervous system, loneliness was never just an emotion. It was a survival signal, on the same biological circuit as hunger and thirst. When you're hungry, your body isn't being dramatic. It's telling you, accurately, that you are running out of fuel and need to act. Loneliness works the same way. It floods your bloodstream with stress hormones. It raises inflammation. It disrupts sleep. Not because you're weak, but because your body assumes, the way it has assumed for 200,000 years, that you are in genuine danger. There's an experiment from decades earlier that shows just how deep this wiring goes, and it's almost too painful to describe, but it explains everything that comes after it. In the 1950s, a psychologist named Harry Harlow studied infant monkeys raised apart from their mothers. He gave them two artificial surrogate mothers. One was made of bare wire but held a bottle of milk. The other was made of soft cloth but offered no food at all. Logic says the babies should cling to the one with food. They didn't. They clung to the soft cloth mother for comfort and only left to feed quickly before rushing back to hold on. Connection, even imitation connection, mattered more to a developing brain than nourishment itself. That single experiment reshaped how scientists understood attachment. Touch and belonging weren't a bonus on top of survival. They were a biological requirement, wired in alongside food and warmth, present before a single word could ever be spoken. Now bring that forward to you, sitting wherever you are right now, You don't think of yourself as a frightened infant clinging to softness. You think of yourself as a modern, capable adult. But underneath your calm exterior is the same nervous system that once depended entirely on a tribe to survive the night. It has never been updated. It still scans every room you enter for a simple primal question. Do I belong here or am I exposed? This explains so much of what otherwise looks irrational. Why a text left on read can spike a small jolt of anxiety. Why scrolling a feed full of other people's gatherings can leave you feeling worse, even though nothing in your actual life has changed. Why being excluded from something as small as a group chat can sting with a sharpness that feels almost out of proportion. It isn't out of proportion. It's ancient. Your brain is reacting to social exclusion using nearly the same circuitry it uses for physical pain. Researchers have shown that the same regions activate whether you're nursing a wound or nursing a sense of rejection. Consider how strange that actually is. A bruise on your arm and a friend who suddenly stops replying are not the same kind of injury. One is tissue. The other is silence. And yet your brain barely distinguishes between them. It treats both as data that something has gone wrong with your safety. That's not a coincidence, and it's not poor design. For nearly the entire span of human existence, being cut off from the group really did predict physical harm down the line. Exile meant exposure. Exposure meant death. So natural selection welded the emotional and the physical together until the ache of rejection became, quite literally, a kind of pain. There's a darker chapter to this story too, one that scientists didn't fully understand until they started studying it at the level of genes. Steve Cole, a genomics researcher working alongside Cacioppo, looked at how chronic loneliness changes gene expression inside immune cells. What he found was almost eerie. In people who felt persistently isolated, genes related to inflammation switched on, while genes that normally help fight viruses switched down. Your body, in other words, starts preparing for a wound instead of an infection. It's bracing for an attack from outside, the kind your ancestors faced when they were cast out without protection, rather than the quieter threat of a virus moving silently through a crowd. Your immune system is still fighting battles from 10,000 years ago. So what happens when an entire society starts trending toward more time alone? That question led to one of the longest-running studies ever conducted on human beings. Beginning in 1938, researchers at Harvard launched a project that would eventually be led by a psychiatrist named Robert Waldinger, tracking hundreds of men across their entire adult lives, decade after decade, measuring health, income, ambition, and relationships. 8 decades later, the conclusion was almost embarrassingly simple. It wasn't wealth that predicted a long, satisfying life. It wasn't fame, achievement, or even physical health in midlife. The single strongest predictor was the quality of a person's close relationships. Warm connection didn't just feel good. It physically protected the body from decline. And yet here you are, in an era with more ways to connect than any generation in history, often feeling more isolated than ever. That's the twist nobody saw coming. You can be surrounded by contacts, followers, and group chats, and still trigger the same ancient alarm your ancestors felt standing outside the firelight in the dark. Because your nervous system doesn't measure connection in numbers, it measures it in depth. 100 online acquaintances cannot quiet a system built for a tribe of 30 people who knew your face, your voice, and your history. Notice how specific your body's hunger for connection actually is. You can spend an entire day surrounded by coworkers, sending messages, replying to comments, technically with people almost every waking hour, and still climb into bed feeling profoundly unseen. That's because your ancestors weren't just near each other, they were known by each other. Someone remembered your name before you spoke it. Someone noticed if you were limping, or quiet, or hadn't eaten. Modern proximity rarely offers that kind of recognition. You can be in a packed room and still be, for all the purposes your nervous system cares about, alone in the wilderness. This is also why the loneliest moments of your life rarely happen in actual solitude. Solitude you choose, a quiet evening, a solo walk, time spent reading, doesn't trigger the alarm at all. Your nervous system can tell the difference between being alone and being abandoned. What it's tracking isn't whether other humans are nearby. It's tracking whether you matter to anyone in the room. That's why a crowded party can feel lonelier than an empty house, and why one good friend checking in can undo what an entire feed of strangers liking your photo never could. This is the modern mirror of an ancient truth. Loneliness was never designed to make you suffer for no reason. It was designed to move you, to get you up, out of the cave, back toward the fire, back toward the people who would keep you alive. The discomfort you feel when you're disconnected isn't a flaw in you. It's a signal working exactly as intended, asking you to do the one thing your ancestors couldn't survive without doing. Think about what that means for the way you treat that feeling the next time it shows up. You wouldn't ignore hunger forever and call yourself strong for it. You wouldn't ignore thirst and call it discipline. So why do so many people treat loneliness as something to push through silently? Something embarrassing to admit, something to scroll past instead of act on. Your ancestors never had the luxury of shame around this. If they felt the pull toward the group, they walked toward the group. There was no pride standing between the signal and the action. So the next time you feel that small itch to check your phone, that quiet unease in an empty room, that flicker of wanting someone, anyone, to reach out first, don't dismiss it as weakness. It's the oldest part of you, still doing its job, still trying to walk you home to the fire. Because tonight, when you finally put the phone down and the room goes quiet, the silence you feel isn't empty. It's the same silence your ancestors feared around an empty fire. And the only thing standing between you and that fear was, and still is, someone willing to sit beside you.